All right. Today on Good Times, Bad Friends, we're sitting down with someone who spent his life telling other people's stories, but has a few worth telling himself. Shawn Ankrom grew up in Southwest Texas, started out in football, got knocked out early, literally, and found his stride in tennis, journalism, and a lifetime of asking good questions. He's a veteran, he's an award winning journalist. He's trained others in the craft, and through loss, faith, and a whole lot of lived experience, he has learned something most people don't realize until it's too late. Just because the world thinks you're past your prime doesn't mean you're done living. Before we get into it, if you enjoy conversations like this, take a second, follow, like, and subscribe to Good Times Bad Friends in that little button right below. If you're driving, go ahead, take your eyes off the road, look, click, and then look back. And then wherever you're watching or listening, it helps more people find the show. This episode's about resilience, faith, perspective, and why good storytelling still matters, especially in a time when it feels like truth is hard to find. So, Shawn, we're glad you're here, dude.
Thanks. I'm
Yeah,
glad
how
I'm
about
here.
good
So-
old fashioned Chat GPT is going to make you sound like
I wrote that. Stop
if you
telling
don't-
people.
you don't win the Nobel Peace Prize after this, or at least get it donated from some lady in Venezuela or something like that, then it would just be an absolute shame. But we always like to start from the beginning. Shawn, just kind of tell us your story, what got you started, what you learned along the way, and then we'll kind of break it down piece by piece.
Well, that went really back far with the whole sports aspect, because that was
I
seventh
do my
grade
research.
when I got, basically knocked out with concussions at a young age in the sport I so very dearly loved and still enjoyed to this day. Hey, I found basketball. I was too short, even though I could shoot pretty good. And I discovered that there was a thing called tennis. So I started playing that and, played that through junior high. And then in ninth grade, we're playing. And one of my buddies came up to the fence. He's out there playing freshman ball out in the heat in Southwest Texas. I'm over there working it hard on the tennis courts. He said, "Man, you got to come back. You got to come back." Because I was a good ball player, baseball as well, relative to Little League. And I said, "Man, let me think about that. I'm running around. I could be hanging out with you guys and all your stinky nonsense, and I could be traveling with girls in skirts." So, young guy at that age, here we go. So I stuck with tennis, and that's where I lived dearly for many years, all the way through high school. So then a little bit of college and off to the military, then around the world with journalism in the military. So
Yeah,
lots
we'll
of
definitely
things in between there.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. Like, obviously, that's the meat and potatoes. But I always love people that have a sports background. Like, obviously, we kind of make the pickleball jokes and tennis and everything. Like, I feel like that's your dojo, and I'm still very scared to step into it. But like for me, obviously being a coach,
Bring it.
I always like to find. I know. I always like to find meaning within the sports you play, like what you found. So, like when you finally decided on tennis, and then whatever else you did, like obviously go back to your love of football and everything. Like, what did that teach you that's kind of stuck with you all the way to being an adult?
Well, like anything in sports, practice, there's that analogy that, practice makes perfect, that sort of thing. I mean, I took that to heart when I started playing tennis because I was really bad. I didn't know anything about the tennis. I couldn't even keep score. I couldn't do anything. So back where I grew up, they had an elementary school nearby and, classic building with the cafeteria. On the back of the cafeteria was one big giant wall. And so I would go over there and count the bricks up about the size of the height of the net, draw a little chalk line. I'd sit there for hours by myself with beat up tennis balls and an old racket and just pound that thing back and forth against myself at that and just driving it hard and working and bouncing and just creating my own little workout and stuff like that. And that absolute practice and that muscle memory that develops and the strength that it develops and the stamina because you push yourself. I just needed that at that time of my life as a kid, and that structure and that repetition helped me, not just in sports, but in school as well, because you kind of get into that mindset. And so that repetition and that practice really drove me to do well in tennis. And I accelerated really quickly after junior high and into high school and did really well. Varsity at a fairly early age, and then moved high schools and went from a 4A back then to a 5A, which was then the biggest school in Texas, not 6A's and all that subcategory now. And I excelled in varsity, et cetera, that kind of thing. So, but my brains carried me into college, and then my lack of a wallet carried me into the military. So, and thereby got all my higher education from that point. But that repetition and that practice and just learning from that. I had an old school coach that was he was literally a a classic coach. You guys are coaches, that kind of thing. He coached tennis, and he was a former D1 player in a small town. Grew up there, came back home, and so he knew a lot about tennis, and he was really good still in his younger middle-aged years. But the funny thing was, he was a real quiet man, everything else, but he could coach you, and he could, tennis players have a lot of attitude sometimes and things like that. And he could coach these guys down and gals down and calm them and motivate them in a way that they would want to excel for the team and individually. And that was really cool. And he was real soft-spoken man. Sorry, I've got some allergies. Welcome to Texas. And got a soft-spoken man, and he chewed tobacco. Back then you could chew and still coach, and he'd spit off the side of the court and every now and then and that kind of thing. And he'd say, well, Shawn, here's what you got to do, or that kind of thing, or whatever, while I'm mad or whatever, calm you down. And then on the weekends and the evenings, he was a goat herder. He literally ran goats.
Welcome
So,
to Texas.
I mean, how classic in Texas. I'm coached by a goat herder, and the number one guy in the state of Texas in singles tennis in 4A at that time, the number one doubles team in 4A at that time on our team. We were all coached by a goat herder that spit,
That's Texas,
that
man.
kind of thing. You're
Tobacco
not going
and
to see
goats.
that anymore. You're not going to have that anymore. No one will be able to cherish those kinds of memories. But so that's where I grew into my sports aspect. And I quit playing basketball in 9th grade and dedicated to tennis. And of course, I'd left baseball. And as Justin can verify, I believe, at least to some degree, at least in softball, I still got some hand skills, and I can take a hit at the plate from a runner.
Justin, is that true? Let's confirm this real quick.
That is 100% verified. And yeah.
We have a big
100%.
adult softball crowd that listens to this podcast, so I don't want to put any false
Big, yeah.
representation.
Wouldn't want to step
about
on any
this
toes.
Stud who came on the show.
I got bowled over at the church softball because I playing catcher, I guarding the play, got to going. Some 20-something-year-old, in the name of the Lord, hit me so hard it about knocked my teeth out, and I still got all my regular teeth. So they're pretty strong, and I went over backwards and onto my face, flipped over totally, my big old keister in the air, and flipped over and flopped over. And he's like, well, you shouldn't have got your guard the plate. And everybody's laughing. And the funny thing was, I was looking for a little sympathy from people, and I didn't get any because I walked around and everybody's like, you all right? Ah! They're laughing at me. And even the pastor was like, well, you're not supposed to guard the plate like that, I was like, what's up?
Yeah.
This is church softball. I came out here to have fun. I got to go to the chiropractor for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah. So two things really quick on that. One, the game was completely lopsided at that point. So it was like a moment that didn't necessarily matter, but then competitives took over, and then all of a sudden we ran into each other to play it. And second of all, the guy that was the most critical of the entire situation was the pastor. It's like, well, it was right. Like everybody looks to this guy like a great human being, and he's like, yeah, shouldn't have been blocking the plate. Like he's just right there, just being a fan like everybody else. And you're like, what a moment we're in right now in church league softball, and people are just getting ran over.
Did the guy that run you over, was his name, did it start with Juh and end with Uston?
It was not me. I was
okay.
I was a lonely spectator in that situation right there, because once again, the game was completely out of hand, and I was just watching the show go down. It was like a WWE spectacle.
And here's the other aspect to that. The guy that ran me over was on my team because I was covering catcher for the other team because no one would catch for the guy. And I'm
so
going,
true.
and he hits me. He's on my team. He hit me. He didn't just like.
You're losing credibility so fast in your softball.
So,
It's like, listen, I was playing for both teams. I was trying to make a play. I was trying to get my own teammate out.
Yeah, I know where to find him on Sundays.
yeah,
So
I
listen,
do. And, there's a vengeance thing in the Old Testament,
Okay,
Never do that. Never do that.
so you were talking about you loved football, concussions happened, you loved basketball, you quit around your 9th grade year and went to tennis full-time minus adult softball. It seems like you were able to really be successful in this individualized sport, or like doubles at times. Like, what do you think you were able to gain from an individual sport or a small sport like that rather than having to rely on a team, if that makes sense?
Well, we did a little bit of both because they had already started team tennis back then. So we played team tennis, and you're ranked in order and stuff like that. And the funny thing was, when I was younger, when I was still at my first high school, I was growing up the ladder, and I played doubles with another guy who was an exceptional basketball player. He went on to play Division I basketball. And so we were best buds from many years before, and we played doubles. We just kind of synced up. We got really good. And then the number one doubles team, both were football players and tennis players. One was a starting quarterback, one was a starting tight end, and they were a year ahead of us in the varsity football team. So we had a team aspect. And the funny thing was, I was never that great of an individual player. I just didn't have that pizzazz for it or that determination for it. I was really good to play for the team. When I finally got varsity at the 5A school, I was playing number one doubles my senior year and number 6 and 5 singles. So it was different. In doubles, I was just, was wicked good. We won lots of tournaments and stuff like that. So in singles, I wasn't that guy that was going to win the tournaments. I was just going to support the team. So it was a variation there. But when you learn with those, it doesn't matter what sport you're in. When you have a team atmosphere and you're earnestly working towards being a part of that team, you're going to do whatever it takes to help. You're going to learn those things. You're going to learn to be humble at times, that kind of thing. And my junior year, I played down a step so I could support the team because we had a couple of guys that had been there before me and stuff. But then as soon as I got my breakout, we just blew it up from there. And so you just do what you have to do to help the team. And I think that applies to everything in life, whether you're sitting in a newsroom and as a journalist and whatever team you play there, or you're sitting on a sales team, done that before, or a marketing team, whatever you do, you've got to learn your position and you've got to excel at that as best you can. And you can take that back to scripture and however you want to do that God gives you that place in that ministry, and you're supposed to do that to the best of your ability that he's given you. I mean, sometimes that's hard because you're in positions that you don't really want to be there. You feel like there's something more down the road, or, I've had to take steps back in life because of certain outcomes and buyouts in companies and layoffs and stuff like that. So you have to adjust. And sometimes the path forward is not going to be, probably not ever really, a straight line, but you're going to have to divert, adjust, go from there. And if you can, it's not easy. I'm not saying I'm perfect at that by any means and have struggled with that, just like anybody else. But at some point, you got to realize that wherever you are and wherever you've been placed by whatever that authority is, work, coaching, sports, whatever, you work at what you're doing, and then you'll get better, and then you're supporting the team. And along the way, you're learning things about yourself, about other people, interactions, your faith, your beliefs, all of those things. And that's you don't always see that in the moment because of emotions and other things, but you have to work toward that as best you can. And that's what's really going to help you in everything. And in everything you do, it doesn't matter what you are in sports or anything else. It's not what scripture was designed to do to help us excel in sports. It was helping us to excel as persons in Christ so that we can move forward and share that with other people. And more often than not, I think, a lot of people's ministry that they miss is your actions and who you are and what you do and everything else. And that speaks volumes because just like on social media, there's lurkers and watchers and everything else there, but there's also lurkers and watchers in your life that you may not know till many moons later that suddenly someone comes up and says, hey, this is why I'm where I am because you did X. And you're like, I didn't scream and holler and throw things when I got bowled over at a softball game. I got up and graciously took my humility and embarrassment and, just ostracized, or whatever you want to call it, and grew from that and joked about it. Now it's a big joke, and you go from there. And sometimes that's really hard in life because sometimes people get hit pretty hard, job losses and loss of friends and family, and both death and just situations and whatever. And you just got to recover from that. And like I tell people all the time is just sometimes no matter what, like in sports, when you're down, you're getting beat, you're not winning, you're not excelling, you're not exceeding, and your team's not winning and things are bad. What do? You just go back to the basics, get back on that wall, pick up that racket and a tennis ball and just start pounding it out and see where it goes. And I still teach my son that today in tennis. When you get frustrated, and let's just go back to the basics. I can always walk you back through those. And the basics are always going to build towards something more. And that's the key to the whole process, I think.
So those basics that you're learning, like in tennis and kind of what you were saying, like while you're going through the process, you don't quite realize like the lessons you're learning, but then later in life, they kind of all come full circle for you.
Exactly.
those basics that you were building specific to your faith, did you build those like early on in life, similar time as tennis, or did you build those basics later on? When did you find your faith?
Well, I came to faith when I was young at 11, and then, went from there. And I was kind of always, not always, but in a lot of scenarios, that in high school and how tough that is in junior high and high school for kids.
Mhm.
And my children have struggled through it immensely in today's world because they're people of faith and morality and things like that. You just don't fit in certain people. And I wasn't afraid to challenge people in the sense of talking to them about it, not like going at them. But
Mhm.
so I grew that, and sports helped me with that as well, and that team atmosphere and learning to get along with others. Because I was a pretty feisty kid. I was a feisty tennis player to say the least. So I had no problem. When I was in my early years, I was like, I'd go up against anybody and get in their face, including tournament directors, other
Ooh.
coaches. you
Yeah.
know. So it was good to have a nice, calm goat herder to take care of me in those early years and formative years of my tennis. So, but all of that just kind of ties together. I really firmly believe that everything in life you can tie back to scripture and learn from that and apply it. And like, we've all been through our periods of life where we seek coaches and mentors and self-help books and all that kind of thing. And I've learned the past few years, especially more recent years, I don't need any other self-help book but the Bible. Scripture's right there. You
All
want to
the
talk about
answers are there.
tough times and suffering? Yeah, there's a guy named Job. You want
He
to,
went through
you
it.
know what it's like that God's going to do to you when you run and you disobey and you shake your fist at him? Go read a guy named
Mhm.
Jonah. It's not a pretty little tale about a whale. So, I mean, he's a pretty rough
Well, and I
dude,
think
pretty much a
yeah, and I
loudmouth, but he
yeah,
got
and I
straightened
think
out.
I think people always want to focus on those good stories, but people don't understand that there's more
Yeah.
lessons than pats on the back in the Bible. So if you need a good reference for most of the or more of the struggles than the good times, there's going to be a lot more help in those situations. For like for you, like was there ever a point to where you were turning the wrong way, and then where did that kind of turn for you to where okay, I found my faith, I found my foundation, and then now that kind of drove that positive behavior, and then what did that kind of instill in you?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm pretty sure that most people at some point wander off the path and things like that. And I'm by no means a perfect man or person or anything like that. So I've had my struggles and wandering away from the church and coming back again and that sort of thing over time. But ultimately I believe once you're a believer that there's a deep inset in your psyche at that point that you're just not going to escape God no matter how long it takes to get you back. He's going to always be there. We always know he's always there and always seeking that. And Jesus is always ready there. And the Holy Spirit's always talking to you. It's just how rebellious are you going to be?
Mm.
That's your choice. That's your personal choice. And how far are you going to go down that road? And I joke about Jonah, but I think that's one of the best books people could read about being a personal ministry and being called of God and that sort of thing, because it's not he really was defiant against God. And when you
Yeah,
really
he was a
read into
punk.
it, yeah, he was a loudmouth punk. And so, gee, who could say that about me? A few people, I'm sure. I'm in the so, and maybe even today, I don't know, but in a
This guy
different way.
blocked the plate.
Yeah, you wanna bring it, I'm there, and just realize I weigh more than you, so it's gonna hurt you too. So, you can do these things and follow through with this with your rebellion, but we all come back, and no matter how bad it got or
Mhm.
how far away you wander, I think, God was always bringing me to a certain thing, and one of the things that my pastor has told me in the past and talking about, your personal ministry and things like that and where you're going, is that a perfect life is not a life that relates to the people in the world. So if
Mm.
you live a perfect life and make no mistakes and holier than thou, or however you want to phrase that, that's the only life you live and experience. How are you going to relate to people that have gone through literally hell on earth? I mean, you
Mhm.
can't. Now, I'm not saying go do stupid things on purpose and stuff like that, but if you've gone through things, which I believe most of us have, and you can realize that that's going to help you relate to someone who's really hurting, who really needs Christ, who really needs salvation and healing and growth in a different direction from where they're going, which could get them killed and straight to the wrong part of the afterlife. That can help you. And I think that's where people miss that in their own personal worlds, in their own personal ministries, which I believe we're all called to do in some capacity.
Mhm.
That may be only one person your whole life. I don't know. God only knows that. But that may be just the people in your world, your wife, your kids, your neighbor, your coworkers. It may just be one of those in each of those categories. We don't know, but I think that personal ministry in your life can, at some point, there's going to be that little moment that clicks, that epiphany that says, I relate to so and so about this. Here's what I need to talk to them about. And then just go share what you know about Jesus. That's all it is. You don't have to be a scholar, a theologian, or understand what hermeneutics or eschatology is or any of that stuff.
Thank goodness.
Pardon?
I said, thank goodness.
Yeah, because those
You
are big
said-
words I don't really like, man.
You're talking about like finding your purpose, and like all these experiences have led you to this understanding, and all of like the past has brought you to the present and what you can do going forward. In your survey, you said the quote, you can live past 55. So what changed in how you view your age and purpose looking forward rather than looking back, if that makes sense?
Well, I think everyone's going to go through that at some point in their lives, no matter what, because we're all headed, once you're born, you're headed towards death. You're growing and your body's changing and so on and so forth. And then you get big and strong, and then you get old and not so strong. So it becomes tougher, and to do strength things and to do the things you like to do. I still in my mind think I'm 35, and no, I can't hit 100-mile-an-hour serve anymore, but I can hit a wicked slice that really messes you up. And no matter how good you are, you're like, how do I defend on that? So you have to adjust and change based on that, because your body's going to change, your mind can change. And I think it's a very hard thing for some people that are headstrong or athletic or just want to constantly propel forward in life. And your body starts changing and things like that. Everybody will tell you 55 is that number, that kind of thing starts just being different. It's hard sometimes mentally, has been for me at times, mentally, to adjust for that and prepare for that. Cause I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my gosh, where did that guy come from? Cause I still do stupid things when I'm out in the woods and hunting, and like, oh, we need firewood. Let me bring the axe and stand on this mesquite log and chop it between my legs in the middle of nowhere. Gee, think about if that slips and cuts me, and
Yeah.
my
trying to meet
bleed
Jesus.
kit's not big enough, and the hospital's 4 hours away, and I don't have a Care Flight membership. Really dumb, Shawn. So you think about those things, and I want to go chase something further that way through the woods, or go explore this, and it's only 4 miles. Yeah, not going to be a good thing in 90-degree heat. So can't do that anymore. So it's frustrating, and I can see where people have really big problems and life changes and affects their relationships and all those kind of things. And if you're not grounded in something like faith, it's going to make it hard for you to turn around and go from there. So that's where I've learned to change, and I hope I'm answering the question you're asking, and to where you adjust accordingly. And you've always had to do that, You go through puberty in sports, you're doing something different, you get stronger, you're going to have to change, get better, do all these things. You get to 20, it's different as well going down the road. But living after 55 is, just kind of the mantra of, I don't want to stop. People talk about retirement. That's like, to me, like the worst thing in the world. I don't want to stop living. I don't want to sit around and eat
I
my
want to
health
stop
parts.
working so I can live.
Exactly. That's the goal. So how do you accomplish that in your later years and things like that if you've had rough times? And some people can't get there. I grew up pretty poor, and I've seen a lot of poor people, and I've been a lot of places around the world, and the backwaters, if you will, of cities and rural areas and things like that. And there's poor people that are just out there living, and they're just existing. Very little purpose in their mindset and things like that. I don't want that for them. I don't want that for me. And I definitively don't want to live in some golf course housing thing or something and deal with that, Maybe you're all big golfers.
Not
I
that
don't
bad.
know. I love
Playing
golf.
golf all day sounds awful.
Yeah, that golf
Yeah.
golf
Well,
thing
for
sounds
some it
really
would
stupid.
be.
Currently
For
live on
me-
a golf course.
For me, it's just going to turn to some point. I'm like, yeah, well, there's Alex on the other tee, so let's see if I can slice this and hit him. That kind of thing,
That's the guy that ran
see
me
how
over at the
fun-
plate. I'm about
let's
to hook
change
one
the
right in his
game up a
forehead.
little bit. Yeah, that's right.
Well, no, talking about
so-
changing it up and then choices that define you. I want you to talk about being in the military too, because I'm always fascinated by this, because we always relate it to in the coaching field, like, oh, the military, like we're going to war, all this blah blah blah. But like me setting foot in the military is completely different. So kind of pivoting back to that a little bit, like how did that shape you? Like what time were you in and what did that teach you? And what are some cool stories you have throughout that whole experience?
Well, I was a military public affairs specialist. So I went in to be a security policeman, Air Force, and get into basic training in South Texas and San Antonio in September. It's pretty hot. And you see all
Yeah.
those, you march around the same areas as security police training guys and stuff like that after they're out of basic training. And you see what they're doing. It's like, yeah, that's too hot, man. So I changed and had some good grades and stuff like that, and changed and was accepted to public affairs school, which is not for everyone. And not everyone's accepted kind of a thing. So I went through that, which changed in journalism, photojournalism, public relations, media relations, community relations, et cetera. And so that's what I did when I got to a base, which mostly for me, tended to be okay at that time. So I was mostly the journalism path, working on the base newspaper. So that's where I learned and honed my journalism skill, old school, talk about practice, military over and over and over, and leads and journalism and all those kind of things. And we didn't get to do like all these wonderful little Ivy League schools and things like that today. And you wrote your pretty little essay and it's very nice, but you've got all these misspellings and it's the wrong tense and it's the wrong thing, but it's okay. You'll do better next time. Oh no. There's staff sergeants and from all branches of the military, and they're in your face like a drill instructor. So
Mm.
you learned it, or they washed you out and sent you to drive a truck somewhere, literally.
Wow.
Yes.
That kind of thing. It was not. We had like one of the highest percentage of washout rates in all of the training schools. So, and I'm pretty sure it's about the same today. So tough. I think only linguistics and psyops or something like that were higher. So good, tough stuff. So you learn all that thing. And the great thing about that was you got to live to an extent vicariously through other people in the military, both currently that were doing jobs, working on planes or jets or, driving the flight line at 2 a.m. and rescuing people on the broken planes, or pilots of all kinds, fighter pilots, cargo pilots, whatever, talk to them, interview all kinds of people on the base. And then what I was fortunate enough to do at certain times was I was able to interview people that were in the community around the base that were survivors of other wars, including World War II. You can look up the Bataan Death March and
Mm.
Corregidor. Interviewed some people like that, people that never even talked to other people, but for some reason they took a liking to me, etc. So that was really cool. That followed me even after the military. When people would find that out that were World War II veterans, they would come talk to me at the paper. They wouldn't talk to other people. The good part
Nice.
about that is you got to experience that. The bad part of that, some of that stuff that they told me is still living in my head. I can't get it out.
Yeah.
But I don't want it. I can't tell it to anyone either, because it's so.
Mm.
Take Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan, and multiply it. So there's things like that you're privileged to have that, and you're blessed to have that because you can understand those things. And as far as war and things like that, I'm Air Force. They don't do anything. We drink lattes and sit around all day, that kind of stuff. That's just a big joke. All the people in blue, and then all the real, ground pounding tough guys and everything else. They say all that stuff until they're like, "Hey, we need help. We're penned. Can somebody bomb this
Mhm.
place?"
Mhm.
Okay, be there in a few minutes. That kind of thing. Or we paved the way, and I did live through a war. So, and you have to be ready for that. You're trained for that. Even though you're in the Air Force, you're ready to go. You got go bags, all these kind of things. So, Desert Storm and Desert Shield. I was there live and in living color. So I didn't go over there, but I was part of that and, did all of those things and talked to people and everything else, and was blessed that I didn't have to go. But then I really wasn't, because because so many people were deployed, we worked more hours back home, that kind of
Mm.
thing, trying to backfill. That's not a complaint. That's just reality, and not trying to equate myself to those that serve and were really on the front lines, which they went through some stuff, to say the least. And that was kind of an overwhelming scenario where we really just overrode everything in front of us. The whole military, all armed forces did. It was just perfectly strategically planned, and anyone that got in our way, it was over. That doesn't always happen that way. About Black
Mm.
Hawk Down, things like that, other things that went bad, Delta Force, all kinds of things that went to rescue people, and helicopters went down, stuff like that. So there's all kinds of things that happened, but when you're in that environment, it doesn't matter where you are, what you've done in your service. You've served. You've sworn an oath that you'll defend this country with your
Mhm.
life. That's a different feeling when you're standing there, even in a mass group where they get you to say those things so it doesn't over affect you mentally. I mean, you say that at your processing center, but then you think about that prior to and after, and it's like, this is kind of real now, to say the least.
Yeah.
And then the reality really hits when you get to basic training, no matter what branch you're in. Even though it's Air Force, they're not very nice down there. They break you down, literally. They break you down, and then they build you up stronger. And and then you go from there, and whatever experience you're going through and stuff like that. So that kid, that 18, 19-year-old wears their more dressy uniform all day long, back in the finance office, back in the States. They make sure all of those people get paid while they're deployed fighting the war. That person is just as important as anyone else, because that means all of those things back home are taken care of, so that person forward can take care of business without worrying about that. And so that's someone that's just as important as anyone else in my mind. Others may disagree with me, so I'm not going to say that I could back then go in and handle it, anything the Navy SEALs did, because they're crazy good at things. And so were the Air Force combat operators, which people don't know much about, that some of them go through all four branches, specialty operations training to do that. So, and that was, Black Hawk Down stuff and that kind of thing. So there's different people and different aspects of that. And no matter where you are, you have to, again, apply yourself and realize that this is your mission, this is your place, and it's important. You have purpose, and do the best you can. To your point, Justin, and kind of those things, like I said earlier with the military, you get broken down. I've seen big grown men cry at basic training that shouldn't be, and small men cry and things like that, because it's hard. But once they're built up, man, the transformation after just a matter of weeks, and how that brotherhood, that togetherness, and it's like, they're ready to go. And it doesn't matter what branch of service you are. You come out with a different mindset, a different strength level, mentally and emotionally and physically.
Yeah. Well, first of all, sir, thank you for your service. We very much appreciate you sharing your story and being here with us. My dad was also in the Air Force and did his basics in San Antonio. And then he missed Desert Storm by a few weeks because my brother was born, so he got to come home. But maybe some paths crossed there. And then my great grandpa was a World War II veteran, so maybe that path crossed as well, which is cool to think about.
Mine goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War.
Whoa.
Yeah, Alex, suck it.
I'm back.
He's fighting the redcoats.
We know
What year was that, Alex?
We know the one guy that came over in the boat, and fighting redcoats.
Christopher Columbus.
But you mentioned on your survey.
It's a culturally insensitive comment there, Colin.
I didn't give him the day. I just gave him the.
He wasn't first.
I just gave him the name drop. That's all.
No, yeah, we did. I'm glad to hear that, Alex, because that legacy aspect is really cool for you when you have that. My dad's Korean War veteran. My grandfather, his dad was World War I, and then it goes on back to folks in the Revolutionary War, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody's got somebody in the Civil War. You've been here that long.
You mentioned on your survey, don't volunteer for anything in the military. Is that in relation to a specific situation, or what happened there?
Yeah, pretty much everything. So, I need so and so and so and so. You just don't. So unless it had something to do with,
I'm good.
Unless it had something to do with basic training, it had you knew it was going to be air conditioned. So that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I joke about that, but that was the funny thing. That was my dad's advice to me. Don't you volunteer for anything. And so he was so mad when I went in, it wasn't even funny. And so you just have to do that. Specific instances, it's just not really, because I joke about that, but the point there is just don't try to overexert yourself or be an eager beaver and be the class pet or anything like that or whatever, to kind of hobnob with whoever to get your way. Earn your way by doing the job and doing it well, but you don't have to volunteer to do things. Now, there's some things that I did volunteer for because it sounded cool.
Yeah, you're like, I'll definitely do that, and then you
like extra
that spirals
training
into 10 different things. And he's like, I'll definitely do the extra push-ups. So when you get out of that and you get your first opportunity, now kind of what leads you into what you do today? Like, what is the jump start that you got, kind of the big first journalism break? Where did it start? What did you learn along the way? Like cool stories, anything like that? Like what kind of started that journey for you that leads into today?
Well, by the time I was ready to get out of the military, and I wasn't a lifetime, a life person or anything. I got out um, after I think it was 5 years or something. Yeah, 5 years. And my first job, because all the training you had and all the work you did in the military, you were far above the average journalist coming out of college by far. So when I got out, my first job was editor of a small weekly newspaper, and I was a managing editor at 25, and I was managing people that were old enough to be my parents, that kind of thing. And that, do you want to talk about some interpersonal conflict? When you go into a small town and we do it this way, and it's always been done this way, and the owner's telling me I want it changed this way, and you start coming in and talking technology and stuff like that, and changing over to computers and stuff like that. At that time, people's jobs are threatened, or so they think. Really not. It would cause some big problems. You have to manage that, plus you had to be a newspaper person. So that jump started me there, and I got some good advice from a civilian publisher while I was in the military about how to keep transitioning to the next step, the next level, the next job, and how to do that. And I did that. So I managed small newspapers from weeklies to 6-day weeks, things like that. And then some change in there for sales and stuff like that. And then basically went to a paper in Ohio for about 5 years. And I started my own photography studio, custom portrait photography studio, and did that. And then we left that after a few years and came back to Texas because I was absolutely sick of the snow and cold and dreariness up there.
You're like, I need to get back here. And
from
then
there,
now
it
it's about
was
to snow this
different.
weekend.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. So, but yeah, and then we just went through some life challenges and things like that, sickness in the family, and then sales and things, and then a marketing job, and then that job was a really good one, but COVID and all the overhiring and all that stuff, and companies struggling, and venture capitalists bought our company out, and then we got laid off, and then did some sales for a while, things like that, and then it's like, you know what? I don't want to leave where I'm at and where I'm living now. And this journalism job came open, so I applied for it. And to this day, I guess they're happy I'm there. So I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
can
been
I
enjoyable training people and getting back into that world of, I had to kind of relearn some things about interpersonal relationships, and I haven't always been the best at that because I wasn't used to that. I'd been working remotely for so long. Challenges there, and you have to adjust and learn and go back and make mistakes, and you grow. And then at the end of the day, I just try to help people as best I can where I'm at. That's all I can do, and help some young journalists and hopefully get them on the right track in their careers early and go from there. So that's rewarding in and of itself. And then it's always rewarding, in the world of journalism, especially newspapers. We build a product every day, and then overnight somebody tears it all down and we have to start all over again. So every single day. So you have to adjust to that. So that's different than marketing and sales and, long-term customers and, that kind of thing. It's every day we start all over. We have blank pages that we have to fill, and we want to fill them with as best copy and content as we can. So, which can be a struggle at times when you're dealing with things like wire services that are very not thinking the same way you think, to say the least.
Yeah.
When mainstream
Well,
media,
that's what I was gonna ask you is so I'm gonna try to put a lot of worlds together for this question. Every episode we have, I have a long-winded question that seems like it's going nowhere, and we've arrived at that point of this episode.
Let me
So
get a
Here it
drink.
is.
Let me get a drink.
yes, go ahead and yeah. So you talked about the students in Yale and like how they had a different world than the people in the military with their reporting. And I know this past week there was a reporter who was interviewing the Jaguars coach after the game, who instead of criticism and critiquing was just like a very like sentimental moment, like had a personal, I don't know, comment of support to a coach, which is very unheard of, and everybody drugged them down. And then Pat McAfee's show came out, and so much support of like, we write our own show. We're the number one show on ESPN because we don't have all these college trained reporters, writers, and stuff. We just do what the people want. So, long way to get here. You won a journalism award, and in the time of division, separation, hate, clickbait, whatever, what separates a good journalist from the noise that is outside of that realm in today's society?
They seek the truth. without their own biases or others overly influencing it. You're
But
always
how do
going to
the
want,
people know the truth?
well, that's a bigger question that's culturally a problem because
Right.
truth is fluid today.
Mm.
This is what I've taught people in classes at church and things like that, and as well as my journalists today. The problem with a lot of, you got to get into the bigger picture. This is a long-winded question, if you will. It's a long-winded answer in the sense that these colleges of all kinds, state and private and expensive and cheap, whatever, they're teaching things from people that don't believe in truth as truth. They don't believe that blue is blue behind me. It's something else, or it's how you view it, or these
Mm.
kind of things. So, and there's bigger scholars and minds that came long before us and long before our lifetimes that warned of this nonsense, to where when truth is not truth and up is not up and down, and up is down and down is up, that there's going to be problems. And that's where we are now. And these kids that come out of I call them kids, they're 19, 20, 20 something year old young adults. They come out and they've sat through 4 or 5 years of this stuff, and they come out, they don't know how to stand that ground. They don't know how to separate. It's one of the hardest things in journalism is separate yourself from your story, which has
Mm.
to be what you're working on. You have to keep the bias out. Now, there's always going to be inherent biases relative to who we are as persons, but you've constantly got to fight that. And it's very tough to do psychologically and mentally, to fight that to get to the truth. 2 + 2 is 2, period. That's all there is to it. The sun rises in the east. That's all there is to it. And so you've got to take those things where you get down to the basics and the truth of whatever that is, and then you've got to extrapolate from there. And you've got to be able to work within that realm, which is very difficult right now for a lot of people because they've been told lies. They've been trained lies. Big word out there is
Mhm.
it's indoctrinated. It's been grilled into their brain, and their work ethic and their knowledge ethic, going back to the sports analogy, is they've been filled with something where normal tennis procedure, normal tennis success practices are not the truth anymore. You know, you
Mm.
can't hit a ball that way because that's not the way it should be. That's anti whatever. So they've been ingrained with this. So it's very hard. And that's why you run into these problems. And then you have these older people that know these truths to be self evident, to be factual, and yet they change those and they run along with this nonsense.
Hmm.
And it's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like some kind of kids game where they just keep making up the story as they go, and it just causes more problems. And then when you get into something that's, ethical or something like that, there's nothing wrong with liking that coach you're interviewing and respecting that coach you're interviewing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then, but within that situation, if your job is interviewing them, asking them questions, maybe some hard questions, you've got to do that job. And then after the
Mhm.
fact, you can step aside and talk to them and say, hey, here's what I'm feeling. I'm just doing my job. And some people will take that the right way. In the old schools, there was respect for that consternation, that antagonism, if you will, that difference of opinion. But now everyone takes everything so personally that it's everything's seen as an attack or an affront or too personal or something like that. Is it a bad thing? I saw that the other night that Coach Tony Dungy was interviewing one of these players. That's just an exceptional ball player, exceptional football player, all pro, playmaker on the team, et cetera. And he's asking him questions and stuff like that. I mean, he's not digging into him real hard or anything like that, but he's just asking good questions, good football stuff I want to hear. He's like, how are you going to play the game? What are you going to do? All this kind of stuff. And then after it was obviously the little interview was over. It's a little short snippet ones that they do, 2 or 3 questions. And afterwards, Coach Dungy reached up and grabbed his hand, and they clasped hands and they chest bumped, man. And he said, "I love you, brother," or something like that. What's wrong with that? It's football. It's a sport. This is not a
Mhm.
constitutional crisis. So sports is a different realm, but you can't be like that when you're interviewing someone who's a political leader or a community leader. You cannot do that. You can't have that relationship with them like that. You have to be
Mhm.
looking for the truth. One of the basic tenets of true journalism that I believe it's the hardest thing to deal with at times for people, is that you must be looking out for everything bad in whoever you're talking to. And I mean that because you can't be talking to a politician, no matter what level they're at, PTA to president of the United States. You can't be talking to them like this is your buddy. This is a person that has a position of power and influence over other people's lives. And if they're doing anything outside of the realm of integrity, honesty, truth, and the greater good, the true greater good, which means all people, then you've got to question that. And you've got to look for things that are going to lead to that uncovering of that truth of what they're doing. And if they can pass that, that's all good. That's what we want. But if they can't, you've got to bring it to light and do something about it. And it's very hard to do that in today's world, because now all these politicians and these whoever, these community leaders and activists and all these people, especially the politicians, they're protected by laws that are supposed to be for the people, but they're actually written by politicians that are helping protect politicians, ultimately. And they're all backed by what? Lawyers and money. And that's what they use to circumvent, delay. The biggest thing in trying to get like the Freedom of Information Act and getting public information and getting this or that information or this or that video from different entities is very simple. They follow the rules to the letter of the law, but they deny or they delay or start over. They delay some more, they deny, they seek higher approval and precedent on their case, which delays it more. And then even if you get what you're looking for, it's so far down the line that what has happened in the public eye, the event has died down. And events die down so much faster in today's world because the speed of the information transfer, that people forget about things, so it becomes less important. So what they've effectively done, even if you win, they've effectively delayed so long that the public's not going to care anymore. And that's the whole process that you run into. It doesn't matter where you are, whatever town you're in, whatever size it is, whatever aspect it is. Look at politics today. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, so to speak, or what part of the politics you're doing. Both parties are doing it in the big parties today. Every politician's doing it. 100%. Every entity is doing this. And what is it doing? What happens when truth doesn't come to the front and there's not dialogue about the truth, the facts? What happens? People can't trust the government, can't trust whoever, can't trust the cops, can't trust the fire department, can't trust anybody, can't trust the mayor.
But
can't do all this.
I think they trust their side. I think they do think that they're being told the truth.
But if you're not getting it out there and you're not being honest and forthright with people and telling the truth, letting the truth come out, whatever that is, okay? Because we're taught to be responsible for our actions, right? And our faith and belief. And you teach that to your players and students. So you're supposed to be all of these things. If that continually does that, what does that do? It creates, what do we have right now? One of the most apathetic publics in the history of the United States. People used to think that voting was one of the greatest privileges there were, and they'd walk miles to get to a voting booth. Now people just go to a bar, watch sports. Who cares? And then they gripe and complain because their taxes go up and all of this kind of stuff. So that's one of the biggest things. This whole cyclical system of what's going on creates this apathetic public. And look at voter turnout. My gosh, we celebrate like it was we just discovered the golden goose when we get 20% voter turnout. 20% of the population, voting population, registered voters, not the population, registered voters.
Yeah, and
you're sunk. So what does that do to the
majority of those
democratic
people
society?
Will 100%, especially that other 80% of people that are still going to be as engaged as they possibly can, but all they're going to do is get on Facebook or any kind of social media presence or any kind of news outlet that fits their narrative and their objectives and their mental state, and then they're going to get trapped in this echo chamber. And then from there, I think you get less exchange of ideas or getting out there and allowing yourself to be heard, because all you've been heard by are people that agree with you. So if you feel like you're going to get outside of the realm, I think that scares a lot of people. Now, wow, like we kind of got into a little bit of serious story, but for me, like when I know your story and how long you've been doing this and everything you see, like there's so many issues that you can take one by one by one. but I think, I say what everybody wants to hear is definitely what I want to hear. Was there like, what's like the coolest story you can share? Like, I know you can get off into these rabbit holes and kind of this unfortunate turn of society and everything, but what's a story that you were like, oh, this is cool, or like this is something that nobody got to cover? That I mean, it could be crazy. Like, what's the best story that you've gotten to cover in your career?
Well, the best story I would probably say I've covered in my career was when I interviewed Baton Death March survivors. They were from a small town in New Mexico. They'd survived. And what that means is that the Japanese took over Corregidor and Baton, and they captured all these soldiers, and they marched them, many of them by the thousands, to their deaths, and then took them off into POW camps and things like that. Super abusive, everything else, killing them, murdering them, etc. And then a lot of them survived. And then they came home, and this small group in this small town, they were guard members, and they got called up, and only about 25% of them or something came back. And then the ones that did, most of them stayed there their whole lives, the rest of their lives. So I got to interview them, and they would never talk to anyone. We knew about the people, and for some reason I made a connection with one of them. And he said, "Hey, we decided we want to come talk to you." But they wouldn't talk. They wouldn't even go into the office with my bosses. They wanted to sit out on this little memorial and talk. And one of the coolest parts of that, there was this one guy that he wouldn't talk to hardly anyone. And the guys told me that he wouldn't even speak to things about what happened to his wife and things like that. But you could ask, one of them, would the leader of the group, he would ask him, "Hey, so and so, who was that guy that died? We were doing this and this happened to him. That was XYZ dude. He died on this day. It was a Saturday, and it was noon, or it was 12:05, or it was 1:33 p.m. or whatever." I mean, he could go like that, just identical memory to that stuff. That was all inside of him, and he would not release that except to that group. And the funny thing about it was, it almost makes me cry to this day, was at some point in all the conversations we were having and everything, he came out and they asked him something. He said, "No, I'll tell him." And he pointed to me, and he started telling me stuff.
Dang.
He wouldn't talk to anybody. And the other guys were like, "Say what?" He's talking to you. And so then from that point, I could ask him a question and he'd answer me. Otherwise, you went through a intermediary there. So that was really cool. And then a second one it's kind of a war story, if you will. Wasn't mine, but do y'all know what an F-111 plane is? The Aardvark. Look that up. It's they called it the Whispering Death in Vietnam. And it's a big older plane that was supposed to be a fighter, but they turned it into just a bomber. And it would take in it. You know what lawn darts are? Throw those and with the metal things that they banned and, that kind of thing. Well, that plane would fly like that and it'd launch bombs, home, and pop up like that and launch those bombs, and they'd go for miles. So they'd launch that bomb and they would take off, and all you'd hear is this, and all of a sudden, boom, you gone. And, but they're also real heavy, and they can fly supersonic speeds like Mach 2, which, and they can go real low to the ground, like right off the ground, like 50, 100 feet, whatever it is. And they can move fast. Now, if you've ever had something go over you at Mach and it breaks the sound barrier, boom, and that combustion, imagine a plane that's massive, weighs more than most any jet aircraft you're going to think of. It's flying 100 feet off the ground, and it goes over the top of you.
No,
What would
that's
I'm good.
crazy.
It will blow your windows out. It'll blow your eardrums out. Well, one of the guys that was a fighter pilot I interviewed,
Unconstipated.
yeah.
Sorry.
You would that would be the least of your worries.
That's my fault. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know where that came
Slipped.
from, but hey, this is a funny show right here. War moments to Jared's all for all. So this fighter pilot was telling me this story that he got a call that this group needed help, and they're, band or whatever it was, whatever you want to call it, and they needed help. So he called ahead. When they called and they contacted him, he said, "I'm coming. I'll be here about this far out." He said, "Get on the ground and cover your ears now." And he came over. He didn't have any more ammo. He didn't have, no guns on him anymore. He was out of bombs, all this stuff. And so the story he told me was that he flew over them as fast as he could, just busting through there at, Mach whatever. He went over the top of them, and they were all buried down. They knew
Right.
what was coming. He went over the top of those bad guys on the other side, blew them the snot out of their heads and burst eardrums and everything else, and just laid them over. And so
That's awesome.
you can, so it kind of goes into the context of the power of this machinery that we have in our armaments that people don't realize how deadly it was and how bad it is and how powerful it is and what it could do. So, and I still to this day love reading stories about what weaponry can do and respect that. But then it's like, oh gosh, I wish we didn't even have all that stuff either side, any side, because it's super deadly stuff. But that was crazy. And this was a pilot that he would never accept a promotion so he could keep flying. And they finally forced him to take his next promotion and retire after, I don't know how long he was in the military. So he was in there a long time, but yeah, it's called the Aardvark, the Whispering Death.
I love it. Well, we always like to end with the signature closing question. And so we just ask something just real quick, just kind of something that you're on right now. No, it'd be super easy. It's like not we're going to ask you any like math question or, what's the fastest plane in the world that goes upside down and gets called unconstipated. But we just like to know, like right here, right now, kind of as you're, a lot of people they have on are kind of growing in their walk with God. So who are you following, reading, or listening to right now that's encouraging your walk with God?
I don't really supposedly follow people anymore for certain things. But I come from a different era, I guess. So I'm still listening to Chuck Swindoll, Adrian Rogers, some of the more modern guys with their podcasts. I can only handle for a little bit. And then one of the greatest things is just for me recently is discovering the local church again the past few years and making that connection and meeting really wonderful people like Justin, and
Justin
that sort
who?
of thing. And in all seriousness,
Justin Gay talking
getting to know people. Yeah, anyway, making those connections, because when you have that connection with your local pastor and you have that connection with a Sunday school teacher and you do have connections with brothers and sisters in Christ, you're learning from them and you're following them, if you will, because you get to relate to each other and talk about shared experiences or different experiences that you can learn from. You can help them, they can help you. So, and I think that's a big key, because I turn back to, Paul and the epistles, and what were they doing? They were starting churches and they were anointing leaders and they were making disciples and they were growing in Christ and they were studying the word, studying the scripture and, really living for Jesus. And I think that's where we need to maintain our focus on all of these things and go from there. And then occasionally get beat up in a church softball game just to give you a little bit of reality of life.
and just keep you humble. No, it's good. Shawn, it's been incredible, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for trusting us with all your stories and kind of telling your story and how everything changed. I mean, it's awesome to see just how many different areas that you were able to grow in and for you to kind of share that wisdom with us. You also have a newsletter that goes out weekly. It's called Arise and Brew, so go check that out. And for everybody listening, if this conversation encouraged you, make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to Good Times Bad Friends on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. Go check out Shawn's newsletter, because I knew we probably weren't going to get to it because we just wanted to hear a bunch of cool stories and everything. But we'll also put that in the description to help you out with that. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time. And man, we'll have to do it again because there's still plenty to share, I'm sure.
Yeah, we went through half the outline.
I know. Yeah, we did not do much.
Guys.
So thanks, man. Appreciate you having on.
Cool beans.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Shawn.
man.
Yeah, appreciate it again.
All right. Y'all take care.
Sir.